Hello and welcome back to the garden. And I'm just cleaning off these spent blooms, cutting some back on this Phlox David. It's suffering with the weather that we're having this year. We've had lots of wind, lots of dry days and very little rain, which is something that we're not used to. We normally have a lot more rain this time of year. But climate change, one year is very wet and this year is very dry. But one thing I hate to see are brown spent blooms on flowers here in the white garden, because it's the white garden and it does take a little bit more, or requires a little bit more care and attention than I normally would give other places in the garden. But today's video is all about filling in those gaps in the borders. I've got quite a few in the hot border, which we'll go to next. And I've also got a new project that I want to start. But first I do have one plant that I want to add to the borders here in the white garden. So let me go and get that. Yes, the new plant is another hydrangea. And this is a new one to me. This is Hydrangea Phantom. Never heard of this till I actually saw it in the garden centre and I just fell in love with it. It's a paniculata hydrangea, and apparently, I've read, don't quote me on this, it has one of the largest panicle flowers of all of this type of hydrangea. They open up lime green, pretty much like a limelight hydrangea. Then they turn to white, and this one here is pretty much nearly white now, as is this one. And then in the autumn time, they turn a blush colour, which I'm looking forward to see. And I don't mind that here in the white garden, because by that time all of the Annabelle hydrangeas will have started to turn brown. So hopefully this will turn a nice colour, but we'll see in the autumn. It's a plant for the back of the border, grows to about 5 to 6 feet in height, spread even bigger, 5 to 7 feet in spread, so it's definitely one for the back of the border. I've added it in a pot for this year because I'm not quite sure yet where I'm going to add it. I've got a few places in mind. But where I'm going to stand it for this summer, for the rest of the summer, the autumn, is in one of the new borders behind here. So I'll need to get a bit of help to move it in position because it's very heavy. What do you think? It's a good addition, isn't it? I just think it's stunning. Long term, I'd love to leave it here, but I don't think this particular spot gets enough sunshine. It requires full sun to partial shade, and I just think it will probably struggle to flower as well here. I'll see. I'll think about it over the winter. But it really does add a sense of drama here to the back of this border. Anyhow, now moving on to the hot border where I've got some plants to cut back and some new perennials to add. Right along the front of this border, I have Alchemilla mollis and Nepeta, all of which now requires a haircut. It's pretty dead, all of the flowers have gone brown and it's not a good look. So the first job is to get in amongst all of the other perennials and cut this back, and then hopefully I'll have space to add something else. Just before I start cutting back the Alchemilla mollis, I'm also pulling out these spent flowers from the Alströmera, and how you cut these back, you don't actually cut them with shears or scissors or whatever you want to use, you just pull it and it comes out very easily. And by pulling it out, it also encourages the clump to produce more flowers, and it's such an easy, quick job to do. So hopefully in a couple of weeks I'll have some more of these lovely orange flowers. Cutting back this type of perennial is very easy. There's no finesse to it, it's just grabbing the spent flower spikes, right down to the clump and cutting through. And in about 2 weeks' time, I'll have a lovely new flush of leaves on these clumps. In fact, I can see them coming through already. So it's a week later from when I cut back all of the perennials. We've had a mini heat wave here in the UK, and the Quarry garden isn't on irrigation, so I couldn't chance putting all of these plants in the ground because it was too hot. We're just tipping into the 90s, and that's not something we get very often here. So I've kept them, the plants, stored away in the shade, and I've watered them every day. But the first one that I put in earlier today is this Rudbeckia Goldsturm. And it's very pretty, and I have it behind me further on down in the border and also at the other end. Originally when I designed this garden, it was designed around these grasses. I had a swoop all the way through the middle of this border, but I've lost quite a few over the years, and in the same time I seem to have lost some of the perennials, so I'm now putting back what I originally had. This is a plant for the front to the middle of the border, I would say. Grows anything up to 2.5 to 3 feet max. I wouldn't say it would grow any higher than that. And it can spread quite far, about 2 feet if you're lucky, maybe it's even more if it's got the right conditions. So hopefully in the next year or two it'll spread out and give me a bigger clump. So that's the first one. Big gap in the front here. Don't know yet what I'm going to add. I'm thinking either Coreopsis to match the one on the other side, or possibly an Achillea. I'm leaning more towards the Achilleas. But behind me, I've got some Coreopsis to add, so let me go and get those. So the Coreopsis that I've picked for this spot is Uptick Gold Bronze, and it's got yellow orange, more orange to red flowers. Red in the main sort of flower area, but it's fringed all the way around with, I would say, yes, yellow I would say, but it's particularly pretty. And as with these Uptick series of Coreopsis, they grow anything from about 30 to 35 centimetres, around about a foot in height and spread. But they're perennial, come back every year. When they're established, they're very drought resistant. So maybe that's just as well, given how our climates are all changing. But it's a great plant for a hot border, and similarly for autumn colour. Very pretty for autumn colour. So I've got a few of these to add. Around this spot, and the bees have already found it. Leaving the hot border behind in the sunshine, let's wander down here to where the next couple of projects will be. One for today and one for the next video. Anyone that's watched the channel for a while will recognise this shade border that I started to develop, I think it was about 2 years ago, and it's pretty much complete now. The star this time of year, heading towards the end of August, is this Astilbe, which is Delft lace. And it's really pretty. And it's flowering late, mainly because I think it's in the shade here. It does have filtered light at different times during the day, early morning, late evening. But I think that's probably why it's flowering so late, when most of the other Astilbes are long finished flowering. if you want a colour, if you want a bedding or an annual plant for shade, this begonia, this is shades of pink, this one. Beautiful. Some of the few flowering plants that I can actually add to this area. Around the back here you have another developed area which is Pulmonaria and the hardy cyclamen. The bigger of the two projects down this area is to change this or to develop this into a shade border. For now it has the odd fern, some shrubs, and lots of weeds. So the focus of today's project is to do something with this area. This new border, which is the border that's running right down to the bottom of the quarry, to the lower quarry. I've cleared this section. It does have lots of spring bulbs in it. So whatever I do here, I'll come across those. But we all have areas that we want to hide things away, and this is mine. You can see all the different paraphernalia. There's soil piles, leaf mold piles, pots, ladders, everything. There's a long run of gravel. This is the gravel that I removed from the white garden. I'm going to make a path in there just to tidy that section up. Got some stones, but this is the start of the border around this, what I call my very mini stumpery area. Added some ferns a few years ago. These are just 3 offcuts from a tree limb that were too heavy to move. And this is where I want to start creating something out of nothing. Okay, I've tidied up the area, I've stored the ladders away. I'm left with these wooden rails. And just thinking this through, I may use them to edge the path and it'll contain the gravel. The only thing is that there's tree roots everywhere around here from all these deciduous trees. So fixing them might be a problem. So the better solution may be to use stone to retain the gravel. I'll have to think about that one, see how easy it is, and I'll need help with that one. But first of all, let's edge the border. Let me get rid of this tarpaulin, edge the border, and we can add some plants. I think the easiest thing before I start planting is to mark out where the border starts and where the path will begin. And that's mainly because I'll know where to add the plants. So I think that's a good starting point. The path has to be wide enough to get the wheelbarrow in, because that's the leaf mold pile and soil piles at the top, so I'll need access to them all the time. So I've brought some stone round. I've got plenty more, obviously an old quarry. I'm never short a stone lying around. But if I mark what I think is this side of the path, and we'll see what that looks like. We've decided to go with stone. I think it's going to be an easier job. I'm not laying landscape fabric or anything like that, because you can see from the path there's no weeds ever grow here. It's so dry under all of these trees, and there is no soil for anything to really cultivate in. So I'm just going to spread the gravel out. And I need an awful lot more stone to take me all the way up to the top, but at least this will give me an idea next to the border of what it's all going to end up like. I think the path is going to look quite good up the back of this. This is the back of the hot border, obviously, in case you hadn't realised. It does go right through the back, out the other end, but there is the leaf mould pile in the way. Whether I'll move that to somewhere else, I don't know, I may do. So this path may take you all the way through to the back, to the other side eventually. I haven't decided on that yet. Also haven't decided how I'm going to edge the back of this very small section of this border. I'm going to play around with stones once I've retrieved them from the lower quarry. But today, the next job is to add some plants, just to start building this space up. And the first plant that I'm adding is a Heucherella. And if you haven't used these before or heard of these, this is a cross between a Tiarella, which I use quite often down in the lower quarry because it loves shade, and a Heuchera. Heucheras I love, but I just can't get them to come back from one year to the next in the borders. In pots I can, but not in the border. So this is the cross, and I have used this one before, and it's worked for me, and it's come back for a few seasons now, so I'm quite happy, quite confident that this will work here. They do like sun to pot shade, maybe pushing the envelope here because it's a little bit more shaded most of the day, but I'm going to give it a go. And this one is Pink Revolution, and I think it's incredibly pretty, and it is height for 40 to 50 centimetres, so it's quite small. I don't think it's going to go much bigger than that. The spread may be double that, but the actual height will more or less stay the same as what it is now growing in the pot, which is about a foot, just over a foot in height. To add to the front of this border, I have quite a few different choices. I've got a few ferns from the winter wall baskets that I've just been taking apart so I can add more ferns. I've got self-seeded, these are all in trays, by the way, trays of water, self-seeded pulmonarias that I've dug out. This is Trevi's Fountain. It's a nice leaf patterns on that one. I've got the black mondo grass. Again, these are all being dug out of pots, waiting to be put into the ground somewhere. And I've also got a bucket full of grasses. Again, these were in a pot of last winter, and it's time for them to be planted out. So I could use those. Or the black mondo grass, which is my favourite. But it's quite a dark spot. So do I go with that? Do I go with the other grass? Do I use both? I've also got some of the hardy cyclamen. Now, this is not to be confused with the cyclamen that's everywhere in the garden centres at this time of year. Those are not hardy. Those are what the florists use in displays. And once they're hit by the frost, they will die. But this hardy cyclamen, which is Hydroflorum, this will come back year after year. I've got some, I think I showed earlier on the video, behind the bench, lovely white ones. But in this section here, I've got the choice of using these pink ones. Now, it's took me a while to work out the layout. Such a tiny space. And it took me ages to figure it out, but I think I've got there. And I've decided on the black mondo grass instead of the Carex grasses, the Ophiopogon grass, because my reasoning behind that decision, the veins going through the Heucherella, lovely black veining, which I think matches to the black mondo grass. So all I need to do now is plant them. Finishing touches. Well, that's it. Another video finished, another section of the garden complete. I'll turn the camera around so you can see the planting close up, because I'm conscious of the fact it's quite dark under all of these deciduous trees. You can see the sun behind me, but it never quite reaches this spot. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.